Your body remembers what your mind was never told. The wound you carry at 40 was never yours. It was passed down like an heirloom nobody wanted. The inner citadel. Today we explore the science of inherited trauma and the shadow it leaves behind. Here at the inner citadel, we believe your midlife pain carries ancestral intelligence waiting to surface. By the end, you will understand why one question can unlock wounds carried across generations. But first, consider how strange it is that your worst fears match your grandmother's unspoken story. You wake at 3 a.m. gripped by a dread with no name or origin. This content explores psychological and philosophical concepts for educational purposes, not as a substitute for professional support. Your hands shake at triggers belonging to no memory you own. Your chest tightens in empty rooms. You have tried therapy, journaling, meditation. The dread returns like something older than your own biography. What if the suffering you fight every day was inherited, rather than created by your own experience? In 2016, neuroscientist Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai published a landmark finding. She studied the children of Holocaust survivors who had never experienced the camps themselves. Their FKB5 gene showed altered methylation patterns identical to their traumatized parents' own signatures. Their cortisol levels were disrupted. Their stress responses were calibrated for a war they never fought. The body had encoded the trauma of its ancestors and passed the alarm forward through the bloodline. Pop psychology tells you trauma is what happened to you. That is a dangerous oversimplification. Trauma is also what happened to those who came before you and was never fully processed. A 2025 review from the University of Western Australia confirmed these mechanisms across populations worldwide. From Rwandan genocide survivors to Dutch famine descendants, the same epigenetic signatures kept appearing. DNA methylation, histone modifications, non-coding RNAs. The vocabulary is clinical. The experience is deeply personal. You have been calling yourself broken for years, when the more accurate word has always been inherited. This is where mainstream self-help fails catastrophically. It tells you to think positive and move forward. You cannot move forward from a wound that was never yours to leave behind. Carl Jung understood this a century before the first epigenetic study was ever published. In Volume 9 of his collected works, he described inherited psychic material shaping us before experience begins. He called it the collective unconscious. Critics called it mysticism. Epigenetics calls it measurable. The shadow, Jung argued, contains everything the conscious personality cannot hold, including ancestral burdens. Your shadow is not only yours, it carries the unfinished business of everyone who shaped your bloodline. Let us examine how this inheritance works, beginning with what your cells remember that your mind forgot. The glucocorticoid receptor gene, known as NR3-cone, regulates how your body processes stress hormones. When a parent endures severe trauma, methylation patterns on this gene can shift and pass to offspring. Yehuda's team found that offspring of mothers with PTSD showed lower cortisol and heightened stress sensitivity. Their nervous systems arrived pre-calibrated for danger. The war was over, but the body still stood guard. Now here is the detail that changes everything for those of us at midlife. Paternal trauma produced the opposite effect. Elevated cortisol levels resembling clinical depression, not anxiety. Your particular emptiness may depend entirely on which parent carried the weight of the original wound. What we have found exploring this literature stopped us cold. The neuroscience confirms what Jung intuited. The archetypes are not metaphors. They are biological predispositions sculpted by ancestral experience across millennia. Jung wrote this passage at 62, after decades spent confronting his own inherited psychological material. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. Making the darkness conscious means confronting what your lineage could not process in its own lifetime. Think about what was forbidden in your family. Was it grief, anger, or vulnerability? Whatever was forbidden did not disappear. It descended into the family shadow and gained weight across generations. You did everything right. The career, the house, the family, and still the hollowness arrives. As if the entire life you built was designed for someone you were told to become. Jung called this the persona trap. The inherited shadow adds a dimension pop psychology ignores completely. Your persona was shaped not only by childhood experience, but by your ancestors' survival strategies generations earlier. If your grandmother survived by staying silent, your body learned before birth that silence equals survival. If your grandfather numbed his pain through relentless work, your compulsive productivity may be wearing his hands. In 1934, Jung wrote that the collective unconscious contains inherited psychic material shaping us before experience. Scientists dismissed Jung's claim as mysticism for nearly a century, demanding quantifiable proof first. Then Yehuda found trauma signatures in the DNA of people who never lived through the original trauma. Jung was not guessing. He was describing a biological reality science needed 90 years to validate. The collective unconscious has a molecular address. It lives in the methylation patterns of your stress response genes. This is not a metaphor. It has been measured, replicated, and published in peer-reviewed journals across continents. Knowing the mechanism differs entirely from knowing what to do about it. Knowledge alone heals nothing. Mark Wallen spent 20 years at the Family Constellation Institute, tracing inherited wounds to their source. He discovered that patients used specific phrases to describe fears that precisely matched unspoken family traumas. He called this the core language, the exact words your body speaks when the defenses drop. A woman says she feels like suffocating. Her grandmother nearly drowned while fleeing across a river. A man says everything could vanish at any moment. His great-grandfather lost everything during a forced migration. The shadow speaks in a core language traceable back through every branch of your family tree. Confronting disowned aspects of self activates the same neural pathways as physical wound healing. The metaphor of healing is not poetic decoration. It is literal neuroscience. Shadow integration is wound repair. Here the Stoics enter the picture. not as emotional suppressors, but as original practitioners of ancestral reckoning. Open Meditations at Book 1. Aurelius begins with a complete and careful accounting of his ancestors. From my grandfather, I learned good morals and government of temper. From my mother, piety and simplicity. He understood that he was not a self-made man. He was an accumulated inheritance requiring conscious stewardship. You did not choose what you inherited. You choose what to do with it. Epictetus, born into slavery, said we cannot choose our circumstances, but we command our response to them. You cannot undo your grandmother's suffering, but you can metabolize what she carried and never spoke aloud. Metabolize, not suppress, not overcome. Digest it consciously so it stops digesting you from within. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, but inherited trauma reverses this principle. With epigenetic wounds, we suffer in the body from experiences that the imagination cannot even access. Traditional cognitive approaches often fail for people carrying ancestral material. Thoughts are not the problem. The body is the messenger, carrying a communication from another era that the conscious mind cannot decode. If depression has not responded to talk therapy alone, ask whose depression this is. This is educational content. If you are struggling, a qualified therapist is the bravest step. The question, whose pain am I carrying, can open doors years of analysis could not. Wallen asks patients to complete one sentence. What is your deepest fear in your words? Not the clinical term, the raw sentence that rises when every defense is lowered. When patients answered honestly, their phrasing matched traumas from relatives they had never even been told about. The inherited shadow speaks not in abstractions, but in the language of the original wound. Of all frameworks we have studied, this synthesis of Jung and epigenetics transforms most. Your shadow work extends beyond the personal into the ancestral. That single reframe changes the entire project. You are completing a healing process that your lineage began but could not finish. This reframe brought patients to tears, not sadness, relief at finally understanding the ancient pain. But understanding is the doorway. What lies beyond requires something more demanding. It requires the turn. Most inherited trauma content stops at acknowledgement. Feel the feelings and move on. That fails. The inherited shadow does not want acknowledgement. It wants what was left undone to be finished. Jung called this individuation, becoming whole by integrating what the psyche has split off. But when the split-off material is not yours alone, individuation becomes something larger. It becomes ancestral integration. At 45, you are metabolizing what 3 or 4 generations before you could not process. Midlife is precisely when the inherited shadow surfaces, not by accident but by deliberate biological design. A 2025 PNAS study confirmed that brain aging shows dramatic nonlinear transitions right at midlife. The brain at 40 is not declining at all. It is reorganizing and surfacing long-buried material. The prefrontal cortex shifts at midlife from acquisition mode to integration mode, from building to examining. Your so-called midlife crisis is your psyche attempting a multi-generational healing project on a biological deadline. The crisis is the psyche refusing to carry inherited wait one more decade without addressing it. Here is the reversal that changes everything. The wound is a summons, not punishment. Your ancestors could not heal this. Their era demanded they suppress rather than process it. But you have depth psychology and neuroscience, and a tested framework for making the unconscious finally conscious. You are the first generation in your bloodline equipped to finish what needs doing. That is calling. The Stoics would recognize this immediately. Amor fati, love of fate, even unchosen fate. Marcus Aurelius met plague, war, and betrayal with the full resources of his examined life. You choose whether inherited trauma ends with you or passes to your children unchanged. Research confirms this is not wishful thinking. Mindfulness-based interventions showed measurable reversal of FKB5 methylation patterns. Narrative exposure therapy showed changes in glucocorticoid receptor gene methylation correlating with symptom improvement. The epigenetic code can be rewritten by giving wounds the conscious attention denied for generations. Tonight before sleep, write one sentence. The thing I carry that was never mine is. Do not censor. The inherited shadow speaks in first drafts. Let whatever words arrive. Then ask yourself who in your family might have been the first to speak these exact words. This is not a weekend exercise. Wallen's complete protocol has 7 stages. We covered 3. The complete practice of inherited shadow integration takes weeks of sustained work. Transformation matches your commitment. This video is not therapy, but bring what you recognized in yourself today to a qualified professional. Remember, genetics loads the gun, but environment pulls the trigger, and conscious awareness changes the entire trajectory. Not all children of trauma survivors develop psychological distress. Many demonstrate remarkable resilience, especially in nurturing environments. Animal studies show enriched environments can normalize trauma-related DNA methylation and restore healthy stress responses in offspring. You are the enriched environment your lineage needs. Your awareness changes the epigenetic trajectory. Aurelius opened his greatest work honoring ancestors. You can transform what yours left behind. The wound you carry is the unfinished courage of people who survived for you. Your task is to feel it fully, integrate it, and set the next generation free. If this reached something unnamed in you, explore the video appearing on screen now.